This is a very important video to help you come back to work after a long absence. I'll explain the typical mistakes that I see and how they can impact your health on the long run. Welcome, I'm Olivier Girard, ergonomist, posture therapist, author of the Posture Manual and creator of the Posture Academy. First things first, a short disclaimer. Usually reintegration or return to work is handled by medical doctors. But now you have to see that when your surgeon operates your shoulders, he or she sees the shoulder but doesn't know anything about your working conditions and so on. And medical doctors have no problem admitting that. So usually when they advise you on how fast you could return to work, well, it's based on experience of how fast the shoulder recovers and things, but you see, it will depend on your profession. So, usually medical doctors ask for my opinion in terms of how should we do that, and therefore, although I'm not a medical doctor, I have 20 years experience in accompanying return to work as an occupational health expert, and in the last 5 years I've been seeing around 100 people a year with such questions. Now, what are the three big principles in terms of return to work? Principle number one is the one I already told you, is ask your doctor only what he or she knows. An orthopedic surgeon knows how to operate a shoulder. He doesn't know how to arrange a workplace so that the shoulder can be spared. Therefore, don't ask your medical doctors things that do not belong to his or her expertise. Point number one. Point number two. The literature agrees on the fact that you should return to work as quickly as possible, because when you're off work for a long period, it's very difficult to return. But that doesn't mean that you should return to work in the same conditions as the ones that broke you, i.e., doesn't mean that you have to have the same tasks, doesn't mean that you have to have the same schedule, doesn't mean that you have to have the same stress, doesn't mean that you have to have the same, hardware, equipment, working conditions. All these are parameters that may need to be adjusted depending on your job and on the reason why you had to be absent. Principle number three is taken from my late mentor in the Netherlands, who was always saying, in terms of the human body, a bit too little is always better than a bit too much. What's behind that? Behind that is the idea that we want the return to work process to be linear. We don't want you to start too fast and fall back and start too fast and fall back, because one, that leaves really long-term injuries into your body that doesn't manage to recuperate well, number one. Number two, even possibly more important, it will strongly impact your psyche. It will make you lose trust and confidence in your ability to recover, and this is probably the worst thing that can happen to you. We want the trajectory to be successful, and to be successful, it needs to be progressive. Which brings me to now listing good practices. Good practice number one is adaptation. And there we will, differentiate depending on the reason why you fell sick. Say, imagine you had a sports accident, you broke your ankle, it has nothing to do with your job. Well, in that case, we will have a look at your working conditions to see if there would be something that can put oil on the fire. But, somehow, if you're, ID developer and you broke your ankle whilst hiking, well, there won't be much to change in terms of the working conditions. Possibly some comfort things, and, making sure that you don't need to walk long distances because your ankle is broken. But, the work is not the primary reason why you got hurt. Now, if you're the same IT developer and you got a lumbar hernia, well, prolonged sitting, which is part of your job, may be really a good suspect in terms of why you had the hernia. Again, there's never a one-to-one correlation in terms of overuse, but it's at least a strong contributor to your pain, and therefore we need to fix that issue. So we will always differentiate, are you back from an accident that has nothing to do with your work, or are you back from an illness that was caused or aggravated by your work? The parameters that you can adapt are time factor. We come back to that, but how long should you work in a row? And potential adaptations, home versus your workplace. Number two, what type of material you use. That means working conditions. That means what chair, what machines, what blah 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 blah. Three, what tasks should you do, in particular in terms of stress, and in terms of being able to return as fast as possible to your work. If I want you to go back to your work, it could be that I remove some tasks from your job description so that you can be here but do something else. Good practice number two, be inventive. A reintegration trajectory is not 0%, then 50%, then 100%. I recently dealt with a lady who had a triple cervical hernia with operation complex thing, blah blah. The doctor wants her to restart 50%. Out of question. We start 10%. If things go fine for 2 weeks, we go 20%, and so on and so on and so on. So be inventive in terms of being very gradual in terms of restarting. Number two, combine working from home with working from the office if the travel time is an obstacle to reintegration, and rethink how you arrange the time. Do you want people to do 10%, that means half a day in one block, or do you want them to work 2 hours on Monday and then 2 hours on Thursday? It will depend on the travel time, it will depend on the endurance, etc. But every combination is possible. Good practice number three, don't fall into victimization. Yeah, it's not helping you to think that this job is your only solution, that there's only one thing that can help you survive, and by chance this thing is the one that hurt your health. You can always change parameters of your life, including change job, change location, change blah 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 blah. Nobody says it's quick, nobody says it's easy, nobody says it's anything, but you always have a margin. And bear in mind that without good health, anyway, you won't do anything with your life. So you really need to, if you have a job which is toxic for your health and that broke you once, get out of this insane mindset, which would be that if you keep doing the same, now things are going to get better. No, your body has been damaged once, it will be damaged twice if you don't do the necessary adaptations, especially as it's now weaker than it used to be. So cut a long story short, don't rely solely on doctors. Don't play the victim, be inventive, and have a 360-degree vision of the parameters of your job that may or may not impact your health.